over in that GitHub workflows upload YAML file, I know that's sort of the configuration for GitHub Actions, as you mentioned. And those secrets, those are the juicy things here that are attractive for us hackers and pen testers here. Now, those are staged as environment variables. Are there any downfalls, as drawbacks? Is the environment variables just the way to go, and then it's a matter of somehow making sure they are protected?
It depends a lot on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to access AWS, this is insecure. There's better ways to do it.
Alrighty. Hey, this is super duper cool. I'm super stoked to be hanging out with two of my great friends, Ignacio and Carlos over at Halborn. And man, it's been a little bit of time since I've seen you both. I think we were hanging out at RootedCon a little bit ago. That was a ton of fun.
Yeah, man, it was like a couple of months ago. It was pretty great to have you here in Spain and finally meet you in person. And hopefully in soon time, we are going to be meeting you again in DEF CON.
Yeah,
oh, yeah,
for sure. We're seeing you in DEF CON.
Absolutely. DEF CON is going to be a ton of fun. And man, making it over to RootedCon was phenomenal to meet you both in person. Because, hey, you're across the water from me. You're a little bit of ways. But I know you're doing awesome stuff over at Halborn. And if you don't mind, I'd love to kind of pick your brain on some of the other security and technology terms that I just keep hearing about. Because there's this whole acronym like CICD. And I hear all these words like pipeline and production deployment and stuff like that. But man, I am naive and ignorant and learning to learn a little bit more about it. So if you don't mind, could I just kind of get your own definition, your own words? How would you explain or describe what the heck CI/CD really is?
Yeah, so CI/CD, normally there's different interpretations. The CI is pretty clear. People always say it's continuous integration. This means when you have a project, and you need to build and test all of the software to make sure that everything's running smoothly and your changes are not going to break previous changes. All of your packages and all the applications can be built correctly without any issues. And then there's the CD part, which is up to interpretation. It can either be continuous delivery or deployment. In my opinion, the difference is with delivery, you're delivering a package. So, for example, pushing a container image to a container repository or pushing a package to an NPM repository, things like that. On the other hand, with deployment, you are actually making a deployment to, for example, a Kubernetes cluster or maybe a VM in the cloud, something along those lines.
So just if I could kind of restate it for my own understanding, I always see like GitHub Actions and Jenkins and Circle CI. I think those are some examples, right, where you basically have a repository, like a GitHub repository, GitLab, Bitbucket, whatever. And then as you push to that repository, other steps and tasks and execution is ran to automatically release it or bring that into production just for you. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the most common scenario. You don't need to have a repository to do this. You could have your code stored anywhere else and just have a pipeline that executes on a scheduled task, or maybe when you push something to an S3 bucket, things like that. I've always seen it used in hand with a repository. It's what most companies do. It's just easy for developers to make a code change and it gets released to production after passing some tests and some checks, but all automatically without having to do anything by the DevOps team.
Man, I know you guys see this every day, just about, between all the tests and assessments and stuff that you're up to. What are some of the most common configurations, and how can so easily those go wrong? Like, are there any misconfigurations? Are there any horror stories that you've seen? I don't know, weird, wild, crazy setups?
So it's very fun you asked that because, to be honest, I'm not much of a DevOps. I always have been focusing on security, mostly on red teaming. And actually, I started to meet CI/CD pipelines through security and through hacking. And to me, as a red teamer, CI/CD is like a fantasy. It's just perfect, man. It's the fastest way you can find to go to production from the earliest stages of development, and in all the way to production, there are mostly no security concerns, and you are going to find all kind of secrets to get privileged access to all the other platforms. So it's perfect, man, because You just need some developers' tokens or credentials, and you are just going straight to production and straight to all the other platforms. It's like we have been improving the security world through years and years and years, and then someone just came and say, hey, now we are going to be automating everything to go to production. And if someone finds credentials, hey, all yours. You have just compromised the whole company. Good for you. So as an attacker, that's what I like, man, because the attacks are so simple, but with so much impact that is just like a dream.
Oh man, I know you folks are the right people to ask of these sort of questions, because hey, I didn't do it justice singing your praises to get things started with. But man, Carlos, you're the fellow that put together LinPs, the Linux Privilege Escalation Awesome script, the WinPs alternative of that, Purple Panda, and so many of these red teaming and hacking tools. And Ignacio, hey, I know you're always cranking out capture the flag challenges alongside me and my crew, and doing other incredible work. So man, I'm excited, and I'd love if you're willing to maybe do a little bit of show and tell. Could you pull up a screen share and do a quick demo of what exactly can go wrong with CICD when you can find some secrets and impact the whole company here?
Yeah, we've set up a little demo. I'm first going to start just by setting up a pipeline, and then Carlos is going to be attacking that pipeline. So we've set up a GitHub repository. This repository is configured to use GitHub Actions. And the purpose of this repository is to get a HTML file right here into an S3 bucket, which is configured as a website. This way, we're able to just by updating the code here and pushing it to the repository in GitHub, it will automatically update it in the S3 bucket, and therefore it will be easy to see in the web. So this is the current state of the website. And now if we go back to the code, we can see in the workflow directory under GitHub, this is the steps that are going to be executed by GitHub Actions. In this case, we're executing on a push to the main branch or a pull request to the main branch. And we've configured some AWS credentials, the region and then the access key and the secret access key. These are configured through GitHub Action secrets, which can be repository specific or organization-wide specific. We see a lot of companies making mistakes and making them organization-wide specific, and then they don't realize any repository in that organization, even a test repository that is made public accidentally or something like that, can get those secrets. So it's important to keep them private to the repository. And lastly, we have the actual job that's going to be executing. We're specifying that it runs on Ubuntu, and then we're checking out this Git repository, so the branch, the main branch. Then we're just CDing into the front-end folder and doing a AWS S3 copy to the bucket. So if I was to go here and maybe add a little text.
Nice. Thank you.
Following your traditions. And then we can git added.
Now, where you're cruising through this, I'd love to ask, over in that GitHub workflows upload YAML file, I know that's sort of the configuration for GitHub Actions, as you mentioned. And those secrets, those are the juicy things here that are attractive for us hackers and pen testers here. Now, those are staged as environment variables. And in my mind, that's the safest way to do it, right? There's really no other option other than hard coding them. Are there any downfalls, as drawbacks? Is the environment variables just the way to go, and then it's a matter of somehow making sure they are protected?
It depends a lot on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to access AWS, this is insecure. There's better ways to do it. You can use OIDC, so OpenID Connect, to connect. You're able to create roles in AWS that trust an identity provider. So you can configure the GitHub identity provider, and GitHub Actions will have a token signed by the GitHub identity provider, supplies it to AWS, and AWS will be able to say, okay, this token belongs to this repository in this branch. They are allowed to assume this role. That way, there's no long-lived credentials. There's only temporary credentials, and it's way more secure.
That's super cool. I had never heard of that, and man, we're gonna have to chat about that and record a video on that. Goodness.
Cool.
Sorry, keep going.
So the change has been uploaded, And now, if I go here, I see a green tick. This means my action executed successfully. Let's go and check the details. We can see here the output of the copy command, and it just says uploaded the HTML file. So now if I go to my bucket and just refresh, we see that this has changed, and we can see the new text right there.
Nice. Okay, so simple pipeline setup. How could we take advantage of that? Is there, hey, some quick and easy gimmick in the CP, the copy command, maybe?
So what we are going to do is this attack that is infamously called poison pipeline execution. So we are going to be poisoning the pipeline. This sounds like super complicated and super nice. It's not other thing that go into the same YAML Ignacio had and poison it, which means we are just going to be putting some extra steps to be executed. So as you noticed, John, we are not logging correctly with AWS because we are using these environmental variables. And actually, this is a question that a lot of clients have, like, hey guys, is there any other more secure way to do this stuff? Because we have tens of different API keys in environmental variables. Like, how can we protect them? And the usual thing to recommend is you can use vowels, you should be encrypting them. But it's true that at some point they are going to be decrypted and some process is going to be accessing them. So the way to protect these credentials is to not have those credentials. So if you can go to AWS and say, trust this repo, then you don't need credentials and only people that have access to the repo is going to be able to access. So the same thing should be able to be possible with other platforms. But as you said, it's not very common. So at the end, what you need to do is to protect those credentials. In GitHub, you could use environments in order to only give access to some branches to the credentials to kind of protect them. So there are always some ways, but ideally, you didn't even need to have them. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen now, and as you can see, this is exactly the same repo that Ignacio has been using in his demo. And as I told you before, John, this is neat because we are not only going to be able to compromise AWS, we are also going to be able to compromise production with just having installed some write access over this repo. This means that I just installed some credentials, some GitHub token, or even just some GitHub cookie, and I'm just a developer in this organization. So I'm just going to be changing the production web page. I'm just going to misdirect the viewers and say that John was here hacking.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
Putting the blame on me. I see.
Yeah, hope you don't mind. Now I'm going to be, in this case, I'm going to be able to commit directly to the main branch. In some other occasions, we might need to bypass some branch protection, but we will be talking about that later probably. So now I just commit the change, and maybe this is going to be executing. I don't want to be executing this right now. I want to do everything at once. So let me change also the pipeline. So this is the attack that is called pipeline poisoning execution. That sounds really cool, but actually it's just about putting a new command to be run. And we know that the secrets are going to be in an environmental variable. So what if we just do env base64, and we need to base64 encode it, because if GitHub notice that you just print some sensitive information in the action, it is going to mask it. So if we just put it in base64, it's going to be okay. So I just commit the change again to the main branch. Now the action is going to be running. Yeah, we have this here. Okay, so if we come here, we can just see all the environmental variables that this run had.
All just masked within base64, so it's not trying to show like any sensitive info. Okay.
Yeah.
That's like always the tactic, right? When you're beating up CICD.
It's fairly common, yes.
Yeah. Do you always get to see a whole lot of the like action and the CI/CD pipeline build output, or are there in some scenarios where you don't and you just sort of have to kind of do it blind? Have you ever ran into that?
I actually haven't. Normally, this kind of assessments, when we do them, we have write access to the repositories.
Gotcha.
There could be the scenario where you only have like an SSH key from a developer and you have access to push to a repository, but not to the UI. that's completely a plausible scenario.
So I have converted this base 64 into, well, I have just decoded. I just put it in env base 64 and decode it. And I wanted to show you the ton of information that by default GitHub Actions have inside the worker, just so the action knows the context where everything is happening. But obviously, we're interested in the more in the sensitive environmental variables we have been talking about. These are the AWS secret and access key that actually you can just see them here. So we just executing env and base 64 encoding it, we just managed to get access to the repo with whichever permissions these credentials have. If we were going to go back to the original website, we can see that actually our changes has been published in production. So we have successfully compromised not only the production webpage, but also the AWS credentials. And actually, we just saw here a very, very, very easy way to compromise a GitHub action, stealing some, well, interesting sensitive credentials. But actually, there are a ton of ways that you can manage, that you can follow to inject code in a GitHub Actions, to compromise a repository, to bypass some GitHub protections. And actually, there is a page in Cloud Hack Tricks here, a book that is free and open to everybody, that is going to introduce you to the magnificent world of CICD and cloud. And is also going to be giving you some hints and some nice techniques about how you could just compromise GitHub Actions. Like, just take a look to all these different techniques you could be using to compromise a GitHub repo. It's crazy. And it's just GitHub. We also have GitLab, we have Circle CI, we have Jenkins. We can go to Terraform, to Atlantis. Like, there are tons of different platforms you could be compromising with very, very similar techniques that fortunately you can find here in Hacktricks. I don't know, John, what do you think about this field of cybersecurity?
Oh man, that is just so wild. Like, kind of as you were alluding to at the very start, I just think it's crazy that, maybe I realize, hey, we're kind of starting with baby steps here. We're going to crawl, walk, and then run for some other awesome stuff you'll showcase. But like, even that small, simple, hey, just add in a whole other step, like modify and tamper with the GitHub Actions to begin with, or the whole workflow for the pipeline. That is the tip of the iceberg, but that can gain you so much access to the whole backend production system, like an entire AWS enclave. So, man, I just think it's wild, and I can totally see and understand why there is so much more focus on CICD. And I'm just stoked and excited to go see the rest of the awesome stuff. Hey, I think we got a couple more videos where we're going to be able to have a chance to get together and see some more magic tricks of all the stuff that you guys are up to. And thank you for just doing this, even setting off these fireworks. I think, hey, that's one way to get us started, and I'm stoked to see what's coming next. So thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure, man.